Okay. Peace and blessings, everybody. This is Dr. Lori, your girl with Still Whole Wellness, trusting that you guys are, Peace and blessings, all. This is Dr. Lori with Still Whole Wellness, trusting that this video is finding you all well and at peace. I have a special guest with me today. As you guys can see, I have Dr. Raina Walters with me today. Blessings to you. How are you today?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you?
Surprised that you're here. I'm always like surprised that I always get these amazing people that are able to come and sit and talk to me for an hour, because I look at your bio, I know how busy you are, all the different things that you have going on. So just the fact that you're here, I'm always just like, how did this happen? So Dr. Walters, just to let people know a little bit about you. So you obtained your doctorate degree, excuse me, in metaphysics last year, right?
I did.
You are currently a master's student pursuing a master's degree in clinical psychology. You're a mom, you're a caregiver, you're an aspiring author, you're an entrepreneur with two companies under your belt. You've got a lot going on.
Well, when you said it, sounds amazing.
So the reason why this is all like very impressive is because, you know, I think we're breaking the stereotype. We're kind of breaking the statistics that sexual assault survivors and people who are coming from a place of trauma, you know, end up in, you know, drug addiction, end up in prison, end up not being here anymore. Like we are actively breaking that statistic. And so just welcome. I'm just it really is awesome when you think about it that way, right? Yeah. So I'm proud of us. Yay us. So
I'm proud of us.
Yes, this is good stuff already. This is good stuff. Just the awareness that we literally are breaking that mold. You know, it just really does my heart really proud and really happy. So first I like for you to tell people how we know each other. How did we cross paths? Because it's been a while.
It's been a while. You know what? How long has it been now?
Let's see, baby girl is 15. My baby girl is 15. That's so crazy. Isn't that really weird? Like, yeah, I still can't believe it. So I want to say it's got to be close to 14, 15 years, somewhere in there, right?
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Time has definitely gone by. So share with people how we know each other. How do we come across each other?
Well, we originally met at church, actually. And you sang in the choir with your beautiful voice. And you also did praise dance, right?
Yes, I did praise dance for a while. I love praise dancing. Yeah.
That was a while ago.
Yeah, it was.
But that's how we met. And it's interesting because we'd known each other for quite some time and had been friendly, but it wasn't until the past several years that we really kind of bonded in our, you know, like passions and perceptions in life and everything. And, you know, good things are happening.
Good things are definitely happening. I think it's really cool. In fact, just before, you know, we jumped on today, just discussing how, you know, a business relationship, you know, how you think it's just going to kind of stay there, you know, and then how the divine will have a different idea in mind and say, no, I want there to be another part to this relationship. So definitely kind of started out as friendly. Then we started working together and doing some beautiful work together with helping women to heal from sexual trauma, right? By way of the Women's Wellness Circle and all these different things that we've done. And then now having this beautiful budding friendship that even though we've known each other all these years, like we just, like you said, are just now like really starting to build that friendship and build that sisterhood. It's really dope.
It's been some years now. But every time we think about it, every time we talk about it, it's still like, you know, when did this happen?
Right, exactly. Like when, how, you know, how did this happen? So I wanted you to start out, you know, just the way that a lot of our guests start out, and just kind of sharing with us about your story really, it's one that can kind of pull at the heartstrings of people, I think.
Yeah.
It certainly pulled at my heartstrings, and I think it was one of the things that really instantly kind of connected us, is because we're both survivors of multiple assaults.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
kind of walk the viewers through your journey with your trauma.
Well, I grew up in a two-parent, very religious, Christian-based household. And my father was very renowned in the community. He was a professor at a university and very big in the community. He was a public speaker, a public figure, but he was also a steward in the church that did several speaking engagements throughout the church circuit, all throughout the country. And he was an incredible public figure. He really was. He was an incredible public figure. He was extremely well spoken, extremely intelligent, extremely giving and loving, and well known. And at home, he was extremely abusive to my mother. He was physically abusive and sexually abusive to me.
And what's really interesting about that, like we started out at the top of the hour saying that, we met each other in church, and so I recall very vividly like seeing your father's name like up
Yeah,
on different plaques and things
it's
like that,
still
and still
there.
in the church.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it feels differently, when you are healed and aware, and you go into the church and see a plaque with a child molester's name on it as someone to be revered
Hmm.
in the
Yeah.
church. It's a different kind of feeling. It's a
Yeah.
different kind of feeling. And then I was also sexually molested and assaulted by my stepfather. My father passed away. My mom got remarried. And I was then sexually molested by my stepfather, whose father was actually the pastor of the church.
Wow.
And so there was a lot of um, spiritual and religious confusion, growing up
Mm.
with the the lessons that I was given, but the hypocrisy that I was experiencing um,
Wow.
was wildly confusing and
Hmm.
challenging for me growing up. Yeah.
Where do you place all of that today? I don't want to like get too ahead of ourselves. I want to go chronologically, but I'm curious, like, where do you place all of that today? What do you do with all of that?
I advocate. I advocate for others,
Mm,
and there was a time when, and we're all healing. We're all healing and we're all on our different journeys of healing. And so I would never go as far to say I'm completely healed, because I'm learning new versions of myself every day.
mhm,
Um, but I did a lot of work, and it took all of my life to get to where I am today, spiritually and emotionally. And I remember in my late teens and early 20s, I was, a mess.
mhm. As we
Just
all
trying
are
to,
at that time.
yeah, I was
Yeah.
just trying to heal and understand life and exist in a world where I wasn't taught any of those very key values. They were never really instilled in me. They were yelled at me,
Mhm.
but you don't learn by words, you learn by example. And
Yes,
so
ma'am.
I was very confused and lost and didn't know I was lost. And so
Mhm.
not only was I hurting myself, but I was unknowingly hurting other people, and didn't know how to be loved, didn't understand the real concept of love. And it took some time.
Mhm.
And even in my body, um after not ever having the opportunity of experiencing, being a virgin, just the value that I had on sex was different at a younger age, and
Mhm.
so there were a lot of different areas that had to be worked through to get to where I am now. But right now, a lot of advocacy work, and
Mhm.
a lot of just kind of sharing my story with people so they understand that they're not alone, and it's not just happening to them, and it is real, you
Yeah.
know?
It really is. And
Yeah.
so you say that you had to do a lot of work on yourself, right? I always love to hear how people came to that awareness. Like when did that happen? How did that happen? Where you just kind of became aware, like, okay, it's time for me to do some work on myself. What
I
was
had
that?
aha moments. I think we all have aha moments throughout life, but more so than anything, it was trial and error in life, you know. I was making bad decisions based on my complete lack of understanding of what boundaries should have been. You know what I mean? And I
Mm,
was I was I was I was trying to not relive consequences. I was
mm-hmm,
not trying to make the same mistake twice. But you think you're not going to make the same mistake twice, but if you don't understand the whole thing in concept, then even though you may not make the exact same mistake, you're still living in the mistake of a complete lack of understanding of what love and boundaries are supposed to look like. You know what I mean? And so it
mm-hmm.
took, you know, a lot of trial and error and knocking my head and, you know,
Yeah. And there was
yeah.
a
And then
period of,
revelation.
yeah, of course, of course.
Yeah.
There was a period of time, and we kind of talked about this in your pre-interview. There was a period of time where um you really were kind of lost, and those boundaries really weren't there, and you kind of
Yeah.
fell into a relationship that a lot of women apparently tend to find themselves in. When we were kind of doing the research in preparation for today's episode, we learned that there's 45% of women that are sexually assaulted then go into a domestic violence type of a relationship. And that was one of the
Mhm.
things that was just like fascinating to me about your story, is that you literally
Yeah.
went from abuser abuser to a different version of abuser. Talk to us a little bit about that and what that was like for you.
So interesting. My story is a little different because I was in a romantic friendship, so to speak, which is different than, being officially in a relationship or even being in a marriage. And there were a lot of red flags that I saw and was very aware of. But because I still struggled with boundaries at the time, it never crossed my mind to just not have that type of person in my life. I, at the time, just assumed because we were friends and not in, we were not in a relationship, but we
Hmm.
were, we were having relations, and
Hmm.
so because he and I had been friends for so long, you just have those friends that they're a little off, they're a little crazy, but that's just my crazy friend,
They're there. Hmm. Hmm. I've got a couple of those.
and
I won't call their names.
yeah, it's my crazy friend. But then, when you're sleeping with your crazy friend, then there are um spiritual bonds and ties that at the time I was very detached from, because my sex was a for me, um I was able to make love and love someone, but I was also able to very easily compartmentalize. And so when I was being romantic with him, knowing that I wasn't interested in a relationship, I completely compartmentalized and just realized, okay, I just thought, I saw the red flags, but I just thought that was my crazy friend. And
Hmm.
then, eventually when it gets in a relationship, it's going to be bad news for her.
Hmm.
It's not going to be bad news for me because that's not my guy. It's going to be
Hmm.
bad news for her. And I just figured that's just my crazy friend. And I was never actually physically assaulted by him. But when I found myself with child, everything changed. And, it was more of a, if I can't have you, no one can situation. And then there was no physical assault.
Hmm.
It just, from what I understood at the time, just kind of changed overnight into a person that I didn't even recognize, even though all of those red flags had been there all the time. I just didn't take note because I didn't think they were my problem.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I'm hearing you right. So you saw the red flags for uh the possibility for domestic violence with him, but because you weren't in that relationship with him, you didn't really associate that those red flags to your friendship relationship?
I didn't associate the red flags to domestic violence. I just
Ah,
associated them with emotional assault and kind of torment and stress
hmm,
and things that I would not accept in my life in a relationship, you know?
gotcha.
Um, so I didn't equate them to domestic violence because I had never known him to be physically assaultive to anybody, but he was definitely um, extremely jealous and unreasonable in certain situations and you know, unnecessarily aggressive in ways that I didn't equate to domestic violence at the time, but I was very aware that anyone in a relationship with him was going to have some, you know,
Some
emotional
problems.
some problems in the relationship, you know, but
Okay.
that was just my crazy friend and I didn't think it was my problem because though I was having sex with him, it never crossed my mind to be in a
Hmm.
relationship with him.
Hmm.
Um, and so I thought I was free and clear.
Hmm.
You know,
Hmm.
I thought I was free and clear.
Wow.
And, you know, again,
So
not having those boundaries set even in friendships.
yeah.
Um, I learned, you know, very soon after, you know, it's just as dangerous.
Hmm.
Mhm.
And so it literally just went from friends, pregnant to what was on the other side of that? So there was no physical violence. So what was on the other side of that?
It was a lot of emotional assault. It was a lot of just emotional dysfunction and a constant urging the from the first of all, he and I had been friends for 20 years.
Hmm.
And so I saw him as one of my best friends. And I had just broken up with my ex that I was with for like 8.5 years. And I was comfortable with him and I felt safe with him.
Hmm.
And so I was healing with him. I thought I was healing with my friend, not knowing that he had been in love with me for quite some time.
Hmm.
And you know, he had spoken to me a few times about being in a relationship. And of course, I said, no, I'm not interested in that. You and I are just friends. Let's keep it where it is. And even when I became pregnant, I was actually really excited. I was like, you know, what's better than being pregnant by your best friend of 20 years?
Hmm.
I thought it was going to be wonderful, you
Hmm.
know? And the pregnancy kind of triggered something in him. And then he realized, you're going to have my baby, but you're not going to be with me.
With me. Gotcha. Gotcha.
And everything began to change. And so my whole pregnancy, and I was a month past due when I had my daughter, my whole pregnancy, he was trying to force me to have an abortion. And then after I had my daughter, it became an if I can't have you, no one can type of situation.
And
And
so
it became very
he's
dangerous.
it became what? Sorry,
It
say that
became
again.
very dangerous.
Yeah, because he
Yeah.
began to like stalk you. I recall you
Yes.
kind of sharing a story with me
For
where,
years.
yeah, where he was
For
like
years.
driving down the street and like almost ran you off the road and
Yeah.
just a
Mhm.
lot, just a
A
lot.
lot of things. And he'd been stalking me for several months. He would never come and make an attempt to have a relationship with my daughter, but he was stalking me. And I didn't find out he was stalking me for months. I had just happened to be outside speaking with my neighbors, and they were like, "Oh, how's your husband?" And come to find out, he had been stalking me. He'd been sitting in front of my house so often in the middle of the night that my neighbors thought he lived here and just went to work early in the morning. And I had no clue. I had
Wow.
no clue.
I can't even
Um,
imagine the chill that you had to have
yeah,
felt like as you're listening to them, like
yeah,
say that this dude was sitting outside your house.
mhm,
I can't even imagine.
yeah.
Um,
And I
and
confronted him, and he admitted it. You know, he admitted it, and but he didn't stop stalking me. So you know, I'd been crying for help. I had been calling the police and trying to get, I was begging for help, begging for help. But because I guess I was too calm and, he hadn't hit me yet,
Mm-hmm.
they wouldn't do anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
And the amount of energy, the police had gotten to the point where, they had told me, if you're going to have to start acting more afraid when we get here, because we're not able to measure the situation properly. And I was frantic in my spirit. I didn't
Of
know that I wasn't
course.
acting as scared as I was supposed to act. I thought I called you, like the why would I call you if I didn't need help?
Right.
And it really became a mess. And when I finally was able to get my first restraining order, it was because so much had happened and so many terrible things had happened. And I learned in that process that a lot of women are being killed before anyone believes that they are actually experiencing what they say they're experiencing.
Yeah. It really is disgusting, when I think about it. It really is, because I just imagine the amount of lives that literally could have been saved had an officer or, some person of authority would have just seen this is a real situation and really allowed themselves to lead with their heart, to
Yeah.
get that person the help that they really did need. Um,
And I think
and
police officers are like doctors in a way that when you experience so often, you become very numb.
mhm.
And that's a dangerous space.
It is a dangerous space. And so I want to go to a space that people might be a little bothered by me going, but I think it's just a natural thing to kind of natural progression. Do you think that any of this has to do, um, with it being racially motivated? Because you bring up doctors, and it has been very well documented that African American women tend to die, very often, at the hands of physicians, and more frequently, and experience larger degrees of discomfort and pain when under doctor's care, because the Black voice is not necessarily heard. With this specific issue, do you feel that there is any cultural piece that is there?
I don't think we can ever exclude the possibility of the cultural effect, in regards to this. What I will say in my personal situation though was, um when I was pregnant and things started to get really bad and I started having to call the police to get help and everything, I then found out that his ex-wife, that he had already had a record for domestic violence with his ex-wife, and I had never known that. And so it wasn't that they didn't believe me,
Mm-hmm.
you know they didn't know where he was. By the time they got here, he wasn't here. And there's only it's the system, because I will say that I had some pretty wonderful police officers that helped. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
all the police officers in Fontana, after how many times I had to call the police, I'm sure they all know me.
Mm-hmm.
Between the ambulances for my daughter and the police and the calls for the
Right.
police, they all knew who I was eventually. And I don't live in an area where, I live in an area where when you call the police, they're going to come. You
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean? They're going to come and they're going to believe you first,
Okay.
and but it was the system. It was the system that was a bigger issue, and not necessarily the police officers that came to my home in an attempt to protect me. It was the system.
And then so
They
you,
can't, what I learned is technically it's not stalking unless you already have a restraining order, right? And so he would
whoa,
never get arrested for stalking because I didn't have a restraining order yet, and it was
wow.
just, it was a mess. It was a mess, and it was the system that was flawed, you know?
So you were able to actually accomplish something that very few survivors are able to do. you were able to get, how long was the restraining order?
Well, my first restraining order was, I believe it was for 3 years, but he violated the restraining order so many times, and my life was very much in danger, like a Lifetime movie. So he violated the restraining order so many times that when I went back into court, the judge granted me a lifetime restraining order, which is extremely rare,
Mm-hmm.
extremely rare. And it one needs to understand how bad things have to be in order to get a lifetime restraining order,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, luckily for me, and it's so crazy to say that, but luckily for me, there was already record of him um being a part of domestic violence in his past relationships.
Mm-hmm.
At one point, you're right, he was chasing me in the middle of the night on the road with my daughter, who was at the time 2 years old, in the backseat of the car. And I was on the phone with 911 begging for help. And I was driving and he was butting me. And he was going to kill me. And the police pinpointed where I was finally. He was chasing me. The police were chasing him, and he wouldn't stop. And they finally surrounded him. They finally
Mm-hmm.
surrounded him, got him out of the car at gunpoint, arrested him, and that's how I was finally able to get my first restraining order.
Wow.
I was finally able, after a few years, able to get my first restraining order. And then, of course, he had more things on his record because he had gotten arrested, and he
Mm-hmm.
was, went to court for that. But I was too afraid to testify for him. So he got much less than he deserved at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But he violated the restraining order so many times that when I went back in court, they gave me my lifetime restraining order.
Wow.
And it was a very tough road. And even as an entrepreneur, no, I'm a public figure who was afraid to be in public,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
it was, a challenging time that I am very proud to say that not only did I overcome that experience, but I use that experience to help other people um, escape from domestic violence situations. Once I realized how difficult, how unjust the justice system is in
Mm-hmm.
helping women who are being assaulted, I had to go back and start helping my sisters who were experiencing some of the same things.
Mm-hmm. And that's where our hearts connect. Absolutely. Just having that same desire. I want to ask you, did you or how do you communicate this very scary um trauma? How do you explain this to your daughter? Like how do you even approach that conversation?
Um, you know, you and I actually talk about this all the time, that we don't have um the luxury of disillusion.
Hmm.
As psychologists and mental health professionals and etc., we don't have the luxury of being disillusioned. And so I have to be very mindful with my words because I understand how effective words are.
Yes. Yeah.
And I have to first make peace with knowing that regardless of my experience, that my daughter may very well decide one day that she wants to meet this person.
Hmm.
And what I don't want is for my daughter to be conflicted with all of these emotions, trying to figure out the whole of who she is and be afraid to, out of fear that she's going to hurt me.
Mm.
And so I'm very mindful of everything I say. I'm honest, but I am appropriately honest, and I'm age appropriately honest
Yes, ma'am.
with my experience. And I tell her my experience. I set boundaries for her. I let her know that these are red flags that you may need to look for. And I also let her know that even good people make devastatingly, can make devastatingly terrible choices that affect themselves and everyone around them.
Uh-huh.
And I just, I want her to be healthy and know that even though all of this craziness, like with all of this craziness, she was made from, born into, and lives in love, you
Mm.
know?
Yeah.
Um, so we have very candid conversations,
Hmm.
that are age appropriate.
I love it.
Yeah, but
I
my
love it.
daughter, and so she's extremely inquisitive.
Yes. Yes, that
you
she
know,
definitely is.
she's her
Yeah.
mother's child.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So this, is there anything that you can offer to the viewers to give some insight? So we've kind of discovered, obviously the crazy statistic of the connection between sexual assault survivors and then moving into domestic violence type of a situation. Can you give um, some psychology behind that? Like what is happening there that causes one to go from one situation into another trauma situation?
Well, the correlation is in my opinion, it's clear and sensible. We are what we're conditioned to be, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
We are what we are conditioned to be. And so when we are being sexually assaulted and sexually molested and physically assaulted as young children, what we are taught is to ignore the fight or flight stage of any experience. We are taught to ignore our intuition and our feelings of fear and our decision to walk away from danger. We are taught to walk towards danger.
Hmm.
Children are generally, in healthy families, they are taught to ignore or shy away from or walk away from or seek help in dangerous situations, and we're taught to hide them and pretend that they don't exist. And our
Hmm.
boundaries are, we have no concept of boundaries when we are raised into and conditioned to believe that those things that we thought were boundaries are okay in this
Hmm.
family, in this house, as long as we don't talk about them. So then we go out into life, right? Completely confused about boundaries, right?
Yeah.
And then we're walking into these situations where we've been taught to ignore our intuition. We've been taught to ignore the red flags.
Hmm.
We've been taught to walk into danger because it's more familiar,
Hmm.
than peace and health. It's more familiar. And we walk into these situations, and it's very sensible that one would
Hmm.
do that. When you
Yeah.
are raised in love and you have excellent role models, then you seek other people with, you know, healthy values and boundaries.
Hmm.
And so it takes a while to even understand why you keep finding yourselves in certain situations, because you don't even realize you don't realize the bad things that are happening. You're just, you think, oh, that's just the way we roll. That's just our relationship. In
Hmm.
relationships, love is not supposed to hurt. Love is
Mm.
not supposed to hurt,
Hmm.
you know?
And so you talk about love, you talk about relationships, and so at some point during your career, you have made the transition from being a person who primarily is standing in that space to assist those domestic violence survivors. And now you've transitioned into this really lovely and very much needed new space, right? Where you are now working as a sex therapist and helping people that have come from these traumatic backgrounds, helping
Mhm.
them to understand themselves on the other side of
Yeah,
the trauma. Um,
yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about that, because we've talked and you said that there's a lot of misconceptions behind what it is that you do. So clear it up for the people. Let the people know what
Well,
it is.
let's start. When you tell someone you're a sex therapist, they don't hear anything else after sex,
Yes.
right? They don't hear anything else after sex.
Mm-hmm.
And sex does not start with the physical act of sex. Sex starts with an understanding of yourself. I'm also an intimacy coach and an intimate and a sexual health specialist. And
Mm-hmm.
so this is about mind, body, and spiritual wholeness.
Mm-hmm.
Understanding yourself and loving yourself, understanding what makes you tick and how to healthfully interact with other people, establishing boundaries, not just with other people, but also within yourself, learning how to look at yourself in the mirror and respect your flaws as well as the things you think are great about yourself, and loving yourself in whole.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a challenge for even the healthiest people,
So
you
you're
know?
saying that sex starts even before the other person even arrives. That
Absolutely.
it starts
Absolutely.
within us and how we view ourselves. Is it also how we view sex?
I want to say intimacy and pleasure. I don't want to just use the word sex, but I want to say
Okay.
intimacy and pleasure
Okay.
begins and ends within ourselves individually.
Mm-hmm.
And how we treat our bodies, and not just the way we eat or whether or not we exercise, but the way we allow ourselves to be loved, the way that we breathe, whether or not we meditate, if we think things through before we act, the environments that we put ourselves in, all of that creates the whole of us. And
Mm-hmm.
eventually having a partner is just, it's just the end part. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? And it can be a wonderful thing, but the bigger part is finding the best love within yourself. And once you find that, then other things tend to come a lot easier, and peace is evident. And
So you coming from this traumatic background, like how this is like, it's mind blowing to me, because it's like, how do you find that within yourself? Like, how do you even know that that's missing? How do you know that it's needed? When
well,
did that
let's
happen?
start
Like,
with the fact I've always been a rebel. You know that. So I've always been a rebel. And though it didn't work in my favor as a child,
mm-hmm.
you know, I think knowing that there was something out there better that was meant for me, believing that there was something greater than what I was experiencing, and wanting to experience it and wanting to explore it, and just being a lover of people anyway. Like, I am a lover. I'm not a fighter. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
and just having that personality anyway kind of led me to help other people, but just knowing that there was something better out there, greater than this, bigger than
Mm-hmm.
me, different than what I'm experiencing. And then if there's not something out there better than this, then why are we lying about it? Why are we lying about who we are in this house?
Mm.
It didn't make sense to me. And
Okay.
so, you know, when I left home and started having relationships and sexual interactions with people, though I enjoyed the act of sex, there were areas in lovemaking where I didn't receive pleasure, and it never crossed my mind I would, because I thought I had already been broken.
Mm.
I thought I had already been broken. I thought that never having experiencing actually losing my virginity, and having all of these things happen to me at such a young age, I just lived life for quite some time just accepting that certain pleasures were not something I would ever experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I stopped accepting it, and I had to explore why I'm not just not so much not receiving pleasure from other people, but not capable of experiencing emotional and spiritual pleasure. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
There was something missing. There was a blockage that I was determined to break down.
Mm-hmm.
And it took a while for me to understand where to even look for the blockage.
Mm.
But I was so able to compartmentalize things that are supposed to bring spiritual bonds to people, that I realized, okay, something's off.
Mm-hmm.
Something's off, something's not right. And I have to do something about this. And the reason I went from, and I'm still helping. I'm definitely still helping in the area of domestic violence,
Yeah.
and there's not nearly enough, but there are shelters, and there are places where you can get clothes, and that'll help you with jobs. And again, there's not nearly enough, and there's even places where they'll teach you how to kind of get out there on your own again. But who helps these women trust again?
Mm-hmm.
When you've been in a marriage for 20 years and you've been raped for 20 years by your husband, and your whole family has taught you that you have to stay in that situation, and you finally
Mm-hmm.
leave, relinquishing all of your family and all of your friends and running and hiding and creating a completely different identity. Okay, so now you're safe physically. How do you learn how to trust again? How do you learn how to trust yourself again? How do you
Yeah.
know how to set boundaries? Who teaches you to do that? Who works with you through not just living in emotional fear, fear of romance, fear of love, fear of self-intimacy? Who helps you with these things? And there was no one out there that was doing it. So I had to create something
Gotta
where
create the space.
people, yeah, you got to create it so people understood that there is love and trust and health after sexual assault, after physical assault, after fear, you know?
Yeah. It's the space that brought us together professionally.
Yeah,
I tell people all the time and have been coined saying that you can be whole on the other side of sexual trauma. In fact, that's how still wholeness got its name.
yeah,
Still whole wellness got its name. The understanding that you can still be whole. Like this horrible thing can have happened to you, but on the other side of it, you can not be the drug addict. You cannot be the prostitute. You cannot be the person with horrible boundaries. You can have inner
right.
peace, right?
You can't have inner
And
peace.
yeah, and so that's one of the things that definitely connected us, is that desire to want to show people that this is possible, that
Right.
you can absolutely accomplish this. This is good stuff. So in our in our pre-interview, you made a statement to me that I have to bring it to the conversation, and
Okay, I don't know what I
but
said.
got to bring it to the conversation, and I want you to give some insight to people on what the statement means. You said in our pre-interview, you said you want to be the sex
Oh.
therapist, the sex therapist. Why that and why now?
Well, I never want to be second best at anything.
Right? And who better than you, right?
Who better than me?
Who
And
better than you?
very passionate about what I do. I realize in various conversations that human sexuality is it's just an astonishing and astounding and amazing thing to me. It just really is. And I'm not talking about sex. I'm talking about the birth of emotions,
Mm-hmm.
the meet cute of intimacy, and not just with other people, but even within yourself, like that
Mm-hmm.
meet cute of intimacy. When you look back and you realize, I love myself. You know what I mean? I feel good in me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about my undergrad was in psychology and developmental psychobiology. So when we talk about like hormones and how they excrete through your body at developmentally appropriate stages, and then how that affects you culturally and socially and
Mm-hmm.
emotionally and physically, all of those things are just so incredibly intriguing and astounding to me. And then we couple that with the challenges of life and the work that it takes to overcome certain challenges, especially depending on the culture that you're in, and just the experience of pleasure and all of the different ways that one can receive pleasure, and
Mm-hmm.
understand that pleasure is not something that you really have the right to expect other people to offer you until you learn yourself, mind, body, and spirit. We want
Mm-hmm.
people to know how to satisfy our bodies, but we are less worried about how
Mm-hmm.
they're satisfying our souls, and it's all
Wow.
interconnected,
Yeah.
and I am so incredibly, I get so excited, even like I'm so intrigued by it, and
Basically, what you're telling people now is that you are a nerd.
I am.
I mean, just you may as well just go ahead and just call a thing a thing. Um, but you're talking about something that that in actuality it really is like a really serious topic when we're talking about trauma. It's the taboo of the taboo.
It is the taboo.
It's the hush topic of the hush topic, right?
It is.
And that is that connection piece on the other side of assault, and because it really does teach you in a very weird and ugly way that you are then in some way not deserving of pleasure,
Right.
or feeling pleasure should then be something that is bad. Or you and I, we've talked about this before,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
my mom, very innocently, I am thoroughly convinced that she had no idea of what she was doing, but very much instilled in me that sex was dirty, and that if I was having sex, I was then that dirty, nasty girl, right? And having that being instilled in you and coming from that trauma background,
Yeah.
then trying to be in relationship and trying to be in healthy relationship, became very challenging, because I still was carrying that energy
Yeah.
of, not only am I undeserving of pleasure, because sex was, when it was initiated, it was not pleasurable, right? But then also feeling that guilt and shame behind enjoying it,
Yeah.
and having some bit of a disconnect with being all right,
Yeah.
being all right with even having sex and not feeling dirty and gross. And
Yeah.
so those are the kinds of things that you help people to work through. And so I
Yeah.
do find it to be very fascinating, because I
Yeah.
feel like it's kind of that, it rounds out that healing for people, which is why we often end up referring clients back
Yeah.
and forth to each other, because
Mhm.
I can kind of deal with my piece that God has given me, and you're able to then work with them on your end.
Yeah. And it's
Talk to
so
us.
interesting, you know, because you and I experienced very similar things, but our
Mhm,
trauma response was so different. You felt,
mhm,
guilty for experiencing pleasure and didn't think that it was meant for you. And I was experiencing all the pleasure and thought it was all meant for me,
mhm, mhm.
and
Yeah,
they're so far opposites on the spectrum and so incredibly unhealthy. And we had to find, this middle ground, you
find that
know,
middle,
that healthy
that
middle
healthy
ground.
middle. Yeah.
Yeah. And I it's and then we live in a world now where people are no longer communicating. And so communication specialty had to be something that I studied, because when we live in a world of emails and texts, so much emotion has now been missed and
Mhm,
forgotten, and just the interaction, the personal interaction with people. And then, we're from a culture where we don't want to talk about it anyway.
mhm.
We don't want to talk about it anyway. We
Really
shy
don't.
away from these now considered uncomfortable conversations. And I guess they've always been considered that, because there was a time where women didn't even have the right to have an opinion
Mhm,
about these things. But the complete breakdown in communication in our society has played such a monumental role in just really living in a world of misunderstood people,
mm. Good Lord, yeah.
you know
Yeah,
um and so that's why I do what I do.
yeah. Well, I'm
Yeah.
I'm definitely glad that you do what you do, because even though we're in the same industry, we're able to really work with clients from a completely different perspective, and both bring a lot of value and a lot of healing to the lives that we serve. So
Yeah.
it's a pleasure. It
It
really
really
is.
is.
It is a pleasure, to
Yeah.
be able to rock with somebody that gets that side of it, in a way
Mhm.
that I couldn't even begin. Like, there's no way I could do what you do. I'm clearly certain on that. There's no way that I could do what you do. So
You're
I'm
pretty
very.
awesome with what you do, as you know.
Say again.
You're pretty awesome with what you do, as you know.
I mean, I do my thing, but I stay in my lane. If I haven't learned anything else on this entrepreneurial journey, I have learned to stay
Yeah.
right where the divine has
And I had to
placed
learn
me.
the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because you
Yeah.
remember I had like 15 different businesses at one
Yes.
point.
And you narrowed that thing down and said,
I
boom, I'm going to be
couldn't do it
the sex
anymore.
therapist. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That is so awesome. Well, I definitely thank you for taking the time out, and with all the different many hats that you wear, taking the time out to sit with me today and just encourage my heart and share your story. I'm so grateful to you for that. Um, how can people reach you if people are wanting to get some coaching from you, wanting to connect with you? How can people connect with you?
Well, a wonderful thing. I am um, taking a break for the month of December. I have my already set clients, but I am opening the calendar up and I'm going to start accepting new clients in January.
Okay.
So people are really excited about that. And I'm also really excited about that. So my website is rdwaltersinc.com. And you can find me on Facebook at RD Walters Inc. and on Instagram at RD Walters.
Oh,
So
I
it's all
love
pretty
it.
standard.
I love it. I love it.
So
I
I'm
love
excited
the
about it. But I'm taking
consistency.
December. Yeah, I'm taking December to make sure that my intimacy and my love and my interconnection is intact. I just
Mhm.
want to I'm taking a self-care moment there, and there's nothing in particular, that's wrong, but I am taking a moment to assess myself and make sure that I am the best version of who I need to be so I can be the best version for who my clients need,
Yes,
what they
ma'am.
need. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know I'm a big believer in that. I will take some days off in a heartbeat. I will send that email. Still Whole Wellness is closed today. Um, so I definitely feel you on that one. Before we go, is there any like lasting just nugget of wisdom that you want to offer to anyone?
You know what? And this is where it all begins and ends. Questions. Start asking questions. Write down the questions that you're asking, reevaluate them weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, maybe even annually, and be very mindful of the differences in how you answer these questions when you decide that you want more out of life, when you want more out of intimacy, when you want a deeper connection, not just with other people, but within yourself, when you have a desire to feel centered and balanced and whole and pleased, you know
Mm,
um you have to start asking questions, and eventually, it's going to be kind of confusing in the beginning, I find, to just ask random questions, but those questions lead to other questions.
yeah.
And all of our questions are going to be different,
Mhm.
but I believe wholeheartedly in journaling, and I know a lot of people feel like it's a tedious task to write every day, and that's not even really what I'm proposing, but just maybe one question a week, and just explore all the different ways within your emotional experience throughout that week, how you answer these questions and how they lead to other discoveries about yourself and maybe within your relationships, not just romantic, but with your family and with your children and just with the people that you interact with throughout the day and throughout life. And I think a lot of revelation comes to people when they start being very intentional about their life experience.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes, and yes. You are speaking the very thing that I try my very best to relay to clients on a daily basis. Yes, absolutely right. Um, okay, so that's it. You did it. You did it. I'm so glad that you were here. I'm glad that you took this time.
Oh, man, thank you for
You
having me.
guys heard what she just said, so you guys can clearly understand why it is so important that she and I continue to keep this connection going and be able to do this work together that we do. I'm just so incredibly grateful, so very grateful for you. I'm going to make sure to leave Dr. Walters' information in the description box. So if you're wanting to connect with her, that will be there for you to be able to do just that. If you are wanting to be a guest on the Still Whole Wellness channel, just do me a favor and just reach out to me. Send me an email at stillwholewellness@gmail.com, and we'll get you going. We'll figure out how we can get you guys on the show. Thank you so much for being here. This was really, really a pleasure. This was really a pleasure.
It's always, it's not even an interview. It's just, kind of two homegirls talking about what we talk about anyway.
That's right. This is like a regular phone
It
conversation,
really
right?
is.
Exactly. You guys, I want you guys to know that I love you, love you, love you on purpose. And again, just thank you guys so much for watching the channel. Make sure you subscribe, hit the subscribe button, and hit that bell notification so that you will know when a new uploaded video has been placed here. Thank you again, and continue to follow this channel because this is where healing happens every single day. You guys be well and at peace, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace and blessings.
Okay.